Yeah,
All right. Thanks, Maya.
you're welcome. Let me make you host.
And I think you started the recording, right? Yep, it
Yeah,
says
I did. Yeah, I did.
okay.
Hold on. Uh, participants, Dave, make host there, change host. All right.
All
You've
right.
got Bridget and I guess Joe in the waiting room. Oh, you're letting
Yep.
them.
I'm
Okay,
just letting them
bye.
in now.
Okay, bye. Bye.
All right. Thanks, Maya.
Welcome.
Hey, Bridget. Hey, Joe.
Hey.
Hey, hold on, where we go? There we go.
Yeah, I'll join you. There we go.
Hey,
I'm gonna stay at the static non-Monday pace.
Mhm. Bridget, congratulations.
Thank you.
When did you officially start?
On the 5th, so 2
Nice,
weeks ago.
nice.
And you're enjoying it?
I love it.
Oh, sure.
It's such a difference from my last place.
Are, are you remote or do you go into DC at all or what?
I've been remote so far.
Okay.
I mean, we can go into the DC bureau if we want, but it's just like it's not much point because most of my team's in New York.
Nice.
So
Awesome. Well, congrats.
Is this something we could say that you're newly at CNN, or is that something that you can't say?
no, you can say it because I actually wasn't sure of this at the point when I was hired. It was just, you're an opinion editor, but they're actually, you know, it's kind of a pleasant surprise to me. They are, having me specialize in security issues. So,
That's awesome.
Okay. Very
yeah,
cool. Very
yeah.
cool. And Joe, you're well?
I'm doing well. Yeah, thank you. I just had a my cochlear implant evaluation, and I am a candidate.
Awesome.
So now we just sort of wait. We schedule the surgery hopefully tomorrow, and giving insurance company an opportunity to say yes and do the right thing versus us having to wait for a denial and then fight it. But all things point to me sometime very soon having an implant and regaining some hearing on the right side,
Nice.
which from a security perspective would be great because I lost my ability to localize sound. So
Yeah.
unless I know exactly where it's coming from by seeing someone or hearing the sound, recognizing what it is, and seeing something that matches the sound, I have to like rely on people looking at in a certain direction. So like the other morning, I was having breakfast at my counter. It's like 5 in the morning. All of a sudden, I started hearing something I'd never heard it before in my house. I was like, "What is that?" I couldn't recognize the sound. And so I'm like, for 15 minutes, I'm walking all over, putting my ear up to things like, "Is where it goes? Is this where it's coming?" Never found it. I finally just sat down, eating my yogurt, listening to the sound that I could never figure out where the hell it was coming from.
No,
Really maddening. Really maddening. Yeah. So
There's
well,
something zen though about the butterflies over your shoulder. I mean,
it's
yeah,
true.
I'm sitting at my wife's makeup counter.
Well, I certainly appreciate having you both here today. And so and are you okay with the topics that I threw out there?
Sure. Yeah, sure,
yeah,
sure, sure.
yeah.
Yeah. I know you guys are game for everything, so I do appreciate it. So, anything that you guys want to talk about that maybe I didn't put on there, or anything I mean, obviously, you have his free reign on here as one. So if we go down any, trails or pathways, please take it where you want to and go from there. So,
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
all right. Well, then I appreciate you being here on a President's Day, and I'll make a joke about Andy here in the beginning, but
Oh,
we'll
good.
so all right, so I'll do the countdown and
Oh yeah, you're recording. Good.
yeah, record. Yeah, yeah, that's
We're the most brilliant podcast ever. Shit, we forgot to record.
I did that one time. I did a solo thing and I did it. I was like traveling. And so I didn't record, or I thought I was recording it, and I looked down at it and I was like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. So I was like, how do I do this? And like So, oh my God, it was crazy. So, all right, so we'll do the welcome back to the latest episode of Nerd Out. This is where I gather some of my esteemed colleagues together that are not named Andy Jabor and bring them together for a podcast. And just happens today is President's Day, or as Andy Jabor will call it, it's George Washington's birthday. If you want to know the backstory behind Andy's hatred for President's Day, but love of George Washington holiday, check out our security spread from last week, or some other activities that we've been doing, Andy and I. But he has a great take on it being George Washington's birthday. That's neither here nor there. I want to welcome in my two of my favorite people, Bridget Johnson and Joe Levy. How are you both, Bridget and Joe? I guess Bridget, or have you recovered from the Super Bowl?
I knew that was going to be the first question. The mourning period is significant, I am afraid. But for all the Brock haters that are out there, it's like the second-year quarterback, and he took his team to the Super Bowl, and he took it to overtime versus Patrick Mahomes. So I don't think they have too much to be ashamed of there, except maybe for their kicker, and we get a new one of those. But um,
I don't think they lost because of Brock. I think that's what people want to point
no.
out. Like, he's a second-year quarterback. I think most teams would. Look. I have a 6-year quarterback, and I would rather have Brock Purdy than Dak Prescott at this point. So
There you go. Yeah.
And Joe, we won't bring up the Giants, okay? Just out of respect.
Yes, I appreciate that. That's great. Thank you.
But how have you both been? Other than that, Bridget, what's news on your front?
Well, as you guys know, but maybe the audience doesn't know, I started at CNN earlier this month, and I'm an opinion editor over there, and I'm already bringing over some of the awesome national security voices. We're gonna have some good pieces coming out soon, and in addition to all of the other incredible voices who contribute over there. And so I'm really loving it, loving my new colleagues. I'm loving CNN. So major pitch for my new home.
Congratulations. Really excited for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely congratulations on that front. Are you gonna be on screen, or are you gonna be behind the scenes? Are you writing article pieces? What are you mainly gonna be doing there, Bridget? Or a little of everything?
No, it's pretty tightly tailored, an opinion editor. Solicits submissions that go with breaking news, and works with the writers to craft the best op-eds. And so we have a great op-ed team there, and I'm really happy to kind of bring my security expertise to that team. So
And quite an expertise it is. So that's great news, of course. Joe, how have you been?
Things have been great. We've been very, very busy here in the city. I wish our team was doing a little bit better. The Nets are, trying hard. And the Liberty will be coming back soon. And really proud of that team. They did really well last year, and really excited about what this season has in store.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in that environment. Did you guys watch any of the All-Star Weekend stuff? I'm not usually a big NBA person until around the playoffs start, but I was really amazed at some of the things that they're doing with court designs and the light up, the LED.
Yeah, the glass court. Yeah, it's really interesting stuff. Yeah.
That is crazy to me.
I
Awesome
can't handle
news.
sports yet. Sorry.
All right. So we didn't
Still
bring
too
you on
fresh.
here to talk about sports, though, even though we've had our good share. But a couple events recently, I want to get your guys' views on that pertain to security, especially venue security, looking at the various types of threats. And then I want to look at the enduring, I guess, subtle, I don't know the right word for it, the subtle escalation of events occurring from geopolitics. In this particular case, Israel Hamas, the conflict there, and how we're starting to see maybe some reflections of of increased activity there, especially when I don't know if there's necessarily been a lot of terrorism or extremist news from that part of the world. So a couple topics we want to get into. I want to start with, though, the attack at the church, the Lakewood Church in Houston last week, in which an individual came into the facility, started opening fire. They came with their 7-year-old son as well. And then was engaged by the security team, the armed security team there. They were off-duty police officers. This is pretty common for some faith-based organizations. They do have security that they are armed. Typically, they're off-duty police officers. The individual was engaged and died. Another individual was wounded, and the son was also wounded. I haven't seen the status of the son lately. But this is a big venue here. The Lakewood Church is Joel Osteen is the lead pastor there. It has national attention. It's a huge venue. It brings up a lot of different things along the security standpoint, but also the motivations for this individual here. So let me just pause there first and ask you, Joe, from a venue security standpoint, looks like a lot of things went despite the incident. I mean, it looked like there are some positive takeaways here, but also it just shows you big facilities, not unlike the Barclays Center, are challenging venues to protect. And there are a lot of opportunities there that you just always have to be on guard for. So what were your immediate takeaways from this incident, Joe?
Well, it's interesting because you when we talk about it, it's a church, right? And it actually is larger than a number of performing arts centers in this country. It seats more. They've got, some of these churches have incredible PA systems, speaker sound systems and lighting systems and rigging where, things will fly from the rafters, et cetera. So they, in and by themselves, are constructed very much with presentation in mind. So there's very little difference between that type of venue and a performing arts venue. And probably people more across the country are familiar with someone like a Joel Osteen church because of his the media coverage that something like that would get than their local performing arts center. And it continues to prove how challenging it can be to prevent these things from happening. So those of us in the security industry, we know the sort of very sad secret that our job is to mitigate loss of life and major bodily harm. It's really difficult to say to completely prevent it. Some of these facilities have so many resources, both time, money, people, equipment, and things like this can still happen. Although that said, as you pointed out, like this was, it could have been a lot worse. And I hate that we use that as a measurement for success when we say it could have been a lot worse. But some venues like this one, I'm not too familiar with the layout, but I imagine it being in Texas that, there's lots of land. In New York, we build up, and in Texas, they build out. So I imagine they have lots of parking area and, control of their perimeter, et cetera. So this person was, of course, able to get in. Whatever searches occurred, if any, at the perimeter or tertiary point, obviously we're able to get in there. I imagine people are able to drive in easier, or were able to drive in easier than will be in the future. I suspect there'll be searches, at the corner or at the road entering the property, et cetera. But again, it's more about ending them quickly. As I understand it, this person obviously had some mental health issues, probably should not have had access to a weapon. Lord knows why, brought their 7-year-old son with them. I think there was a disputed family or something, but very, very sad. But yes, it could have been a lot worse. And there were some people who stopped it fast.
So let me ask you then, Joe, so on a situation like this, even though it's a church and a different type of venue than what you're accustomed to, do you look for the lessons learned out of these, and do you do the analysis and evaluate how maybe this could have, were there weaknesses that you can then ratchet down on? Is that something that you guys look at?
Yeah, I tend to wait a little bit to try to get some of the real information, as the dust settles, because when it first starts coming out, depending on what your bias, we saw some early reports of like, and forgive me if I get this sort of off base, but they were saying that this was a trans terrorist attack, trying to bring in the trans community, and I think since then that has been either debunked or put aside. But it's a perfect opportunity for people with agendas to help muddy the waters. So for me, I would, in the beginning, I would take note of all of the things that immediately come out, and then try to weigh them against, what can I learn from that? What can my team learn from that? What can we put into play? To try very hard to be, conscious of, other people's agendas trying to hijack, a tragedy that doesn't need to be hijacked. There's enough meat and potatoes behind the real issue here than piling other things on it. So I wait a little bit, probably, months, 4, 5, 6 months before, any real reporting comes out that will give us actionable information. But I suspect what will come out of it will be any nuances around, situational awareness, detecting behavior of what this individual was doing, and leaving the car, walking through the parking lot, entering the front doors, attire, mumbling, nervousness. Those are the types of things that we'll be looking for, and figuring out how we can apply those to not only my venue, but all venues across all sector types.
Yeah, no, they're great points. Bridget, as Joe mentioned, obviously there's been a lot written about this, the shooter here. There was, obviously there's a history of some mental illness. There's some familial disputes ongoing. There was struggle. I think there was even struggle with substance abuse and so on, and various threats in the background. Obviously painting a very big picture for this individual. Also, there was a note about there was a reference to Palestine on the weapon, and there was some insinuations that the shooter may have made some other anti-Semitic remarks in other forms and whatnot. That anti-Semitism doesn't really apply to Joel Osteen's church because it's a non-denominational part, but it could be blended into one. I mean, what do you make of this situation, and is there any connection that you've seen?
No, I think because of the target, people would understandably gravitate in the early moments after shooting with concerns, that it could be related to terrorism, related to extremism in some way, given the fact that it was a very prominent megachurch. But like you said, there's a definite history of mental illness there. There was a history that she had too of brandishing weapons, different incidents with guns that had to do with relatives that the relatives then later documented or reported to journalists afterwards. But it just, especially the fact that she brought her young son with her, and reports indicate that Child Protective Services had been involved in some point with the son, and there was apparently neglect of some sort of a special needs child there. I believe that the target was just likely chosen because it was large, it was prominent, and it had security that would engage her after she started firing. She started firing and she did not kill anybody. So I believe that she was there for basically suicide by cop, and that's why she brought the son, who is in the situation with her ex-husband as well, according to reports. So I think it's a first, it's a valuable reminder that a lot of times these targets that could be favored by extremists are also going to be picked for certain attributes by people who are not motivated by extremism, and that security plans need to take that into account too. And, very important also what Joe brought up about the disinformation that just spread like wildfire after this incident. Even when cops came out and said, there's no indicator that she's transgender, the 7-year-old, I believe, son is her biological child. That narrative that that we've seen it after multiple shootings. We saw it after there are some people online who still insist that the Uvalde school shooter was transgender. We saw it after Club Q, etc. And so this pushing of a narrative that um, uh, transgender individuals are somehow more likely to be prone to violence, and in turn, um, potentially opening up more transgender individuals to be the target of violence from people who hear these narratives and believe that they need to somehow defend their community against transgender individuals. So it's even though I believe that the incident itself was, ultimately isolated from extremism. Yes, she had the writing on her gun and apparently other postings, but we know that there was mental illness there. Even though the incident itself, might be tangentially connected or divorced completely from extremism, the reaction to it could encourage extremism, depending on how the disinformation spreads and how people absorb that disinformation.
Yeah, so you both have brought up this point here. So, like Joe, you talking about the AAR, doing the after action, giving it about 4 to 6 months to kind of to cool down. And then Bridget, you went there right before I was about ready to ask the question about the disinformation part. This muddies a lot of the. I think this creates a challenge for security teams, right? Because like the instant reaction is let's associate blame with something, when the reality is that yeah, I mean she could have had Palestine she could have supported the Palestine movement, but had no connection to this event at all in any way, shape, or form whatsoever. But that's an easy narrative for the media to latch onto. Same thing with the his, her, the use of, they went by different names. Okay, so she's got to be transgender, and I think this creates a challenge for that. How do we overcome that disinformation to try to be the voice of reason? Let's not overreact in the immediate 2 to 3 days in the aftermath, and let's let the investigation play out. Joe, do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, where would you go with that? You've already kind of outlined, you give it your time, but there's got to be some pressure from some organizations to say, we've got to do this now and we've got to lock everything down. How do
Yeah.
you respond?
Yeah. Well, a binary answer, I don't think it's possible. I think that there are too many points of interest. Even with political parties, you don't have consensus. So every bit of information is being pulled in 1,000 different directions, and whoever has the loudest megaphone at that moment gets to say whatever they want to say. And if they've got a cause or they've got an agenda, they're going to try to manipulate it any way they can to further their particular cause belief. And frankly, these types of things, and I'm sure we'll end up talking about a couple more on today's podcast, but these things get people elected, right? Whether you're for or against it, you can take any one incident and you can rally up your base to say, see, we told you if we were in charge, that wouldn't happen. And then the other side's like, well, see, we're in charge, and the other side is trying to hijack this for their purposes. And it's just like it's maddening, because if all sides would just come together and figure out a way to compromise versus just cramming their agenda down the other side's throat, I think we could we might accomplish a couple of things here and there. But so I'm sad to say I don't think it's possible to figure out a way to get people to slow down and focus on what's real, let the real information come out. Everybody wants a scoop. I'm sure Bridget knows better than a lot of us, when it comes to she's lived in the media world forever. these big networks want to be the first to report on something. Now, a lot of the bigger ones, of course, wait for multiple sources and they confirm and all those things, but still they face an extraordinary pressure to get it right. But that's just a small handful, access to internet. Like I could be a reporter tomorrow and I could post a blog. And if I find out a couple of good keywords out there, I'm going to have some followers. And if I say something crazy enough, I'm going to have more followers. And so I don't think it's possible. And I'm hoping Bridget's going to give us a little bit of hope here and tell us that it is, but I suspect she won't.
Wait, we're talking about Bridget Johnson, right?
Yeah, our Bridget. Yeah, please, Bridget.
Okay. I want to make
tell
sure.
us something that's good news.
Bridget always brings the she slaps you across the face with reality, and it's
Yeah.
So Bridget, where do you go? So yeah, I mean, Joe brings up a great point. I mean, this is what people live for. In fact, to be able to overreact to this, especially within the extremist circles. Most papers and real journalists, they do have to, there's standards within the journalist community. Bloggers have no such standards. And I would even argue some people who have primetime media spots, they're not journalists, even though they're on a news channel. They can report what they may want to report. And I think when you latch on, when you break down this very complex individual, the threat actor here, she was very complex, but you can focus in on these things and dissect it apart ad nauseum and feed and stroke your community. I mean, this is probably, I guess this is like their Super Bowl when they see an event like this. I mean, what do you think, Bridget?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna, bring up another recent case here, to kind of, present this as an example. But okay, the Pennsylvania guy who did the video beheading his father because
Yeah.
his father was a federal worker.
Yeah.
And there was just, the whole anti-government extremist screed there, and trying to rally, patriots to start a revolution and take up arms against the government and kill other federal employees. The whole screed there. I don't know if you guys actually watched that video. I did. It was it hit many points that were favorable with domestic violence extremists. And so to watch their reaction in online forums to that video was they really wanted to have this guy be a hero of some sort. So even then, you think of like Lakewood shooter, people trying to take it and turn it into a narrative that'll work for them. Domestic violence extremists were trying to take the beheader guy, and turn Justin Moan into somebody who could be some sort of recruiter for their cause, some sort of inspiration for their cause. But ultimately, there was a lot of disagreement within a lot of these forums about the fact that he beheaded his father. A lot of them didn't like that. They thought that he should behead somebody else's father, basically. And just, kind of not knowing how, the whole, tactic of what he did would be received, and how that might bury his message, etc. And yet still some others online were claiming that it was a false flag that was involved a fake head in a bag with fake blood, in order to get the government to crack down on anti-government extremists. So yeah, so when you see these incidents happen, you see the narrative spins start very, very early because they're trying to take whatever nuggets they can, to weave it into something where they can use it for inspiration, recruitment, incitement, empathy, or sympathy to their cause.
Yeah, I think it's all of these things are just wildly challenging. And I'll even bring in another one, the Kansas City Super Bowl parade, incident, and I don't want to make it more than it is. But I mean, you look at these type of events, and this is not different than a couple years back where the July 4th shooting, it was much deadlier shooting. This had only one fatality, but 22 were injured. In that July 4th parade shooting, it was I think over a dozen individuals were killed in that attack. But it just goes to the increasingly challenging environment that security teams have to do. You for a Super Bowl parade where you can't control access points. The parade route is well known in advance because you want people to come and celebrate. There's no police force in the world that would be able to control something like that. And are we sadly at a state where it is on some of these type of things? You're like, you do your best and you just have to live with the risk is where it is. I mean, is that where we're at? I mean, obviously there's gun control, but we don't want to get into that. But I mean, Joe, how do you can't possibly secure those type of things? What type of approach would you take here?
I don't even know where to begin, because outside of not having these events, right? And we could go down a rabbit hole talking about why that is or isn't a good idea. But for this discussion, having them, and you just said it, there's not a police force in the world that could keep it from happening. You could mitigate its spread, but I don't know how you stop it. You could completely clear the route, clear every building, every home on the route, or anything that has like line of sight on the parade route, and then slowly check people in. I mean, you'd have to start a week before the event. I mean, it's just not possible. Um, yeah, and then similar, we were just talking the misinformation. Was it the Kansas City shooting where somebody, I think it was a senator or some political person, immediately claimed that this is illegal immigrants who did this, and started to hijack this event as well, or was I think that was this I think it was the Kansas City parade, right?
It could have been. I have also heard if it was a white shooter, we would have known right away who the individual was. This is just stereotyping against white people because it was a minority. Therefore, we're going to protect that individual. Yeah, I've heard it all. I think at this point.
Yeah. And I do think they were young. They're like under 17
yeah.
and under, right?
Juveniles,
So they're in the juvenile system, which will protect their information more because they're well, at this point, I don't know if they'll be tried as adults or not, but that and the gun laws in Kansas City, and what you need to conceal carry or not, or they're pretty loose. Not to say that did or didn't have anything to do with this particular event, but you can get a gun anywhere. So if you've got if you're hell bent on causing harm or chaos, it's not that difficult to do.
Yeah, it just makes it a very challenging environment. So let's switch a little bit topics. So we've been kind of talking a little bit about this already, but Bridget, looking at the church shooting with the reference to Palestine, we've seen some other disruptive attacks disrupted around the world. We've also seen some indication that the enduring conflict in between Israel and Hamas. We've seen it from protests and demonstrations. We've seen small level acts of vandalism and targeted activities there. But we are also seeing, I guess, a incentive now for individuals to be inspired or influenced in a way that we haven't seen in a couple of years. Not to say that there haven't been global terrorist attacks around the world over the last several years is not accurate, but it hadn't been to the scale that we saw much earlier, maybe 10 years ago, where we had the attacks in Paris and Belgium and a lot of other large scale attacks. The enduring conflict with Israel and Hamas, are we almost getting to that point where this is now inspiring a lot of actors around the world?
I don't know. Because a lot of the uh inspired Islamist extremists, they've really had a lot of trouble finding their footing, for the past couple years. Even though there have been events that could have acted as trigger points, basically, to get out there and you know, it's not like ISIS and Al Qaeda haven't tried, you know, with their propaganda to latch on to different events, to latch on even to things like California wildfires and saying, hey guys, you know, you can go out there and do the same thing, you know, get a match, it's tinder dry, you know, go out there and you know, start a big conflagration. Um even though, you know, a lot of the tactics that have been suggested, you know, have been beginner level, you know, and you know, would be simple for a person without training to go out there and do. They still haven't gotten the kind of homegrown violent extremism that they would be hoping for. You know, now I don't know if things like you know, the Houthis being designated as a terrorist group for their maritime attacks you know, might start more of a conversation among Islamists about Islamist extremists about critical infrastructure security and, you know, opportunities that may present themselves there. But you know, that at times too has also been kind of a point where Islamist extremists and domestic violent extremists have dovetailed in, you know, looking at critical infrastructure security and the vulnerabilities and in power and water and trains and you know, all sorts of vectors, you know, for them to be able to attack. But you know, it is a situation, you know, where you kind of watch and you've seen so many opportunities go by and, you know, kind of wonder at what point and inspired by what you know, will inspired independent contractor, so to speak, extremists start to get going again.
Yeah, I think that's I appreciate that perspective because it had been really quiet, and it's just been interesting to see whether or not, you know, that has been the effects of long-term sustained targeting of individuals affiliated with these groups, or whether the, you know, the recruiting of those groups has not been on target. I find it very fascinating. So great perspective there, Bridget. Look, and we've got the 2020, you know, for domestic violent extremists, we got the 2024 election that is already hot and I mean, it's already, I mean, sizzling at this point. I mean, we've got all of Trump's legal actions that are, presumably, he's going to be the Republican candidate. We've got all the conspiracy spinning around Joe Biden, whether what he's going to do if Joe Biden is even alive. I mean, I've heard a lot of conspiracies that he's been dead and there's actors playing those roles, and Trump is actually the real president at this point. It's
Weekend
crazy
at
that
Bernie's.
no, what?
Weekend at Bernie's.
That's right, the weekend at Bernie's. It's been fascinating to hear these, but even more fascinating is just the people who will talk to you straight laced and just communicate their beliefs in these theories. I mean, it's really, it makes it challenging to counteract those. And it could be, you know, a flashpoint for somebody to be triggered into doing something. I mean, I thought the QAnon conspiracy was dead when Trump lost in 2020. But apparently it's just refueling now, and all of the things that, I guess, when you have a conspiracy, you don't, I mean, you just move the goalposts, right? If it doesn't
Right.
turn out to be your way, you just move the goalposts a little bit. So,
Yeah, it's an escalation of commitment, right? Like nobody can change their mind either side, right? You got supporters for both, and whether you're proven wrong or not, you can't change your mind for fear of being judged. I'm not entirely sure why, but
yeah.
it's definitely a challenge for people who just won't wake up and just sort of see a reality right in front of them. And then what do you trust anyway, right? Because you'll swear that you're in a bubble and you're only seeing, you know, the information that you know, is in your Facebook feed or your Instagram feed, and not seeing a balanced side. And I think there's probably some truth in that. Like I know that I see a majority of one-sided things in my feeds, and my brother, who happens to have a different political affiliation, he sees the other side. We often get on a phone call in the morning as we're each driving to work, and you know, each of us are right when we're having our heated debates in the morning.
Yeah, it makes it all very interesting. I guess the key question is, are you going to be buying the $399 shoes and or are you going to be donating to the GoFundMe campaigns that go wrong? I know we don't go political here, but it does show you like the depth of some of these things here. But okay, so a lot of great discussion here, a lot of great things to chew on for sure. I want to just, I guess, wrap up this podcast, and I didn't put this in the pre-notes for you guys to think about, so I apologize for putting you guys on the spot here. But and Bridget, we'll start with you. You're welcome. We'll start with
Whew,
but
thank you.
um, we're still early in 2024. Obviously, we have the big election in the United States here in November, but there are elections around the world as well that are going to be just as contentious, I believe. What is something in 2024 that you're looking towards or looking forward to from a security standpoint that, or something that we should all be keeping an eye on?
I said this last time around election security, but I will continue to beat that drum. Given the fact that if we go back to talking about venue security, how many, campaign rallies are protected? How many long queues of voters in line? There's going to be a huge effort to get people out to the polls this time around. It's all going to be about turnout. And unfortunately, some of that turnout happens in regions of the country where they're poorly equipped to expedite voters through lines and and through the polls. um so you do get a lot of uh to not have a better term, sitting duck type situations,
Yeah.
security wise, when it comes to elections, when you have both campaign events, people waiting to see um uh, candidates at in areas that can be difficult to secure. Granted, with Secret Service protection, it gets easier, but you also have lower level candidates running for a number of key offices too. um so I think that security also should not just focus on the presidential campaigns, but on a lot of contentious races across the country, and a lot of the voting and just campaign gathering venues that could be more vulnerable to someone who wants to send a message, someone who wants to act on behalf of an extremist ideology or movement, and someone who might see the campaign season as the perfect time to try to act.
No, I mean, it's great. And look, we've seen a rise, and I wouldn't say it's a rise, but very notable election incidents over the last 2 to 4 cycles. I mean, not just with the United States, but we had over obviously in Japan. We had the former prime minister there who was assassinated while at a speaking engagement on the stage there, and we've seen some incidents in the UK as well. So Joe, great point. Joe, where would you go with something to keep an eye out for in 2024?
Well, before Bridget started bringing up a really good point, I was actually going to talk a little about cyber physical convergence, which is huge. But I'm going to go back, and I actually want to echo and share. This is at Bridget's point. This is the election, the stolen election was was either not stolen, was stolen. All the conspiracy theorists around that. So I agree. I think probably extra special care and attention needs to be paid to this election cycle and all the down ballot races, as you're saying. But here's the scary part: so many of these voting locations are community based. They're schools. They're the senior centers. They're the post office locations. They're the high schools. And every single one of them, the day before they start thinking about loading in the electric equipment, uh, are basically unattended. And if I were going to do something, I would try to get something in there, secret something in there the day before, the week before, let it sit dormant. So I would really encourage law enforcement and security professionals to do a real proper sweep of these venues because they're porous, they're easily accessible, and a lot of them have back rooms and closets that people have probably not been in years. And it won't take much. It won't take like, something blowing up with hundreds of people in line. Also, vehicle ramming could be a thing. If you could just scare people away from the polls, someone with an ideology saying we're going to be doing the same thing across the country would be enough to keep people home and away from polling centers. So I'm with Bridget on this one. I think elections and the locations this year is one of the most important things we need to pay attention to.
Yeah, it is definitely definitely something very much to keep an eye on. And because there are so many different things that could just cause the flashpoint to just escalate things very quickly and just build upon it, because people are going to be predispositioned to already believe one thing or the other. The election was stolen or it was rigged. It was always one thing or the other. And they're going to be, you're going to have all these individual sleuths out there to find that one piece of evidence. See that one person's going to the dumpster. Yeah, it looks like a McDonald's bag, but I saw them putting, vouchers in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think there's a lot of things that it's just ripe for engagement. And I do have to mention that I think Andy would second this, is the foreign influence in this is going to be very we're already seeing indicators of it. We're already seeing some trafficking of from whether it be Russia, China, or one of the other threat actors out there trying to peddle this disinformation that we've been talking about all day here, to really just further seed in people's minds who are already leaning in that direction, just that one iota of doubt that would cause somebody to then go from being a regular person sitting in their house to taking action in a variety of forms or fashions. So great call outs there, both of you. I really do appreciate it. And again, I really do appreciate you guys joining me here on President's Day, or George Washington's birthday, Andy Jabbour. And with that, we'll probably just wrap things up on that comment. But I do want to give you both one opportunity here. Anything to promote or plug? Bridget, we'll start with you.
I'm just gonna plug something like Joe said because I thought it was so important. Red teaming your security. How would you attack the church? How would you attack the Super Bowl parade? How would you attack the polling station? And I would just stress that security folks have to have that at the front of their minds going into the coming months here.
Yeah, great point. Great point. What about you, Joe?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Bridget in this. I'm going to say tabletop those, do tabletop exercises. They get on your feet, do situational training exercises there, test your resilience, really encourage people to, not be observationally blinded by repetitiveness. Don't become complacent. You really have to keep your head on the swivel. And only, we say this all the time, like if you have 100 events, the security professionals have to get it right 100 times, but if you're a threat actor, you only have to get it right once. And those are really depressing odds. So you have to test your teams. You have to train your teams.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think I'll end on just something that I think we've all talked about in the past here, just situational awareness, right? Just having that understanding of what your environment is, looking and just not being so boxed in to say, well, we've never had an incident, therefore we'll never have an incident moving forward. The dynamics and the threats are changing on a near daily basis. And we just always have to be assessing and evaluating how those threats can apply to us and what we do from there. So I think with that, we'll put a pin in it, everyone. And I just do want to very much appreciate having you both here. Bridget, again, congratulations on your new role. It's going to be, I'm excited to see all the work you're going to be out of there. And Joe, really do appreciate you coming on again and talking through things with us. I hope you both have a great rest of your day. And until then, I will bid you adieu.
Thanks, guys.
Talk to you soon.
All right, now how do I stop the recording here? I had
Something else about Andy before you stop.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
one more thing.
Yeah,
Get onto
that Andy Jabbour, I really did.
How about those
Andy.
lions?
Andy.
This will be an outtake. I might have to put this in the back end.